Hello everyone. Today we'll talk a bit on the very popular essayist of English literature, Charles Lamb, who belongs to the Romantic period of literature, who is a man you should of course get to know before knowing his works as such. Because most of the essays, he is known as an essayist, as a romantic essayist, and the prince of essays. And he is a person who has of course included all the bits of his life, of all the things that happened in his life on into his essays. So his essays could be taken as, or his essays could be considered as a collection of whatever happened in his life, the people he had met in his lifetime, the things that he had seen on a daily basis. These are the things which informs his essays. Say for example, the sundials, the fountains, the gardens, the Thames River, the old bengers, the lawyers, his father, grandmother, his patron, Samuel Salt. All these people, actually, the people in the South Sea house that he was working in, all these people come alive in his works, in his essays, and with these characters, these people, these instances, these things that he has seen around, the nature, everything that he has seen around, comes so alive with a brilliant touch of humor. At the same time, you have a touching pathos to it. Now, talking about his very personal life, which we ought to know so as to understand his essays. We'll begin with his father. His father, John Lamb, he was a barrister's clerk, and he was a person who had to really fight hard against poverty. Elizabeth, who was his mother, she lost her first child. Who was another Elizabeth, actually. It was a girl, so she was named Elizabeth, but she died as a baby. But the next one was a boy who was Junior John Lamb, who was the brother of Charles Lamb. He was born in 1763, and he actually grew out to be a very strong, sturdy, spirited, handsome young man, kind of an unconcealed favorite of his mother as well as his grandmother Field. Now, the girl Mary, later on, Elizabeth gave birth to Mary, was on 3rd December 1764. She was sort of a less robust, or we do not know of any sort of a puzzling illness before 1794, when she was 29 years old, because she had of course shown some signs of mental instability during her childhood. Lamb, in one of his essays, Lamb writes in 1796, he writes of grandmother Field's unthinking and repeated reproach to the little girl Mary. In quote, I'll just quote it: "Polly, what are those poor, crazy, mothered brains of yours thinking always?" This was the kind of attitude that grandmother and her mother did have for Mary. Of course, the favorite was always John. So probably no one did try to understand and love her as they loved John. That is what Charles Lamb had always felt. Charles Lamb, once when she was 21 years old or so, wrote to Samuel Taylor Coleridge, who was a very good friend of Charles Lamb, who did influence Charles Lamb in a great way. We'll talk about that later. And when she was 21 years old, he wrote to Samuel Taylor Coleridge about his sister. It's like this: "Poor Mary, my mother indeed never understood her right. She loved her as she loved us all, with a mother's love, but in opinion, in feeling, in sentiment, in disposition, bore so distant a resemblance to her daughter that she never understood her right." So the boy John was always kind of a darling of grandmother as well as his mother, And John, because of the circumstances, probably he had to he had to depart to London to the boarding school, Christ Hospital, at the age of 5. Which, of course, because it's at the very small age of 5 that it weaned him early from this close dependence of the family. And when Charles Lamb was born on 10th February 1775, he was actually the last child. This 10-year-old Mary was finding a sort of an outlet for this emotional deprivation that she was having inside her, and she consoled herself, or she relieved herself by caring for this little Charles, the boy. Mary was always a sort of a mother figure for Charles Lamb. And Charles Lamb at that time itself, he was somewhat sickly and physically underdeveloped. But then he had a charming dark curly head and a ready laugh all the time. So Mary Lamb almost fitted herself into, very happily she fitted herself into the role of a mother, kind of a mother's helper, of course, Elizabeth's helper. But then Elizabeth, she was actually doing everything that a mother is supposed to do. And Elizabeth must have had some sort of a relief that both of them had taken so much up with each other. It was Mary who had taught Charles his letters before he could speak. And when he began to speak, it was with a bit of stammer that he was speaking. He was stuttering, he was stammering. Mary was quite interested in reading, and you have Samuel Salt's library all to themselves. Charles and Mary, they read voraciously. Both of them were voracious readers. Probably the presence of Mary in Charles Lamb's life was, of course, a very defining factor for him to become such a famous, such a darling of the essays of English literature. So Mary always had a sort of she had this tendency of devouring all the reading matter that she could find, and all the library books and the books of adventure. It was kind of all the time for Mary. Books were a sort of an adventure on the one sense. It was also a refuge on the other sense. So talking about John Lamb, we were actually talking about John Lamb. John Lamb was had to send his son John to Christ Hospital, which is a charity-run institution actually. Poverty was so much that he had so many difficulties in educating his own children. Probably with the timely intervention of Samuel Salt, who was a patron, he could actually help both John and Charles Lamb to get an admission to the Christ Hospital. And Charles Lamb got into Christ Hospital in October 1782. And Christ Hospital, as I told you before, is a charity-run educational institution, which is where children from genteel family who did not have enough money to teach their children did go. So because he got admitted to Christ Hospital, Charles Lamb left William Byrd's Academy to join Christ Hospital. Of course, he did make occasional visits to Grandmother Field, and Grandmother Field's real name is Mary Field. And Mary Lamb was named after Grandmother Lamb. Now Mary Field, and he describes the moments that he had spent with her, with Mrs. Field, in many of his essays. We do not, when we are talking about Grandmother Field, we ought to talk about Charles Lamb's romantic life as well, because we do not know much of Charles Lamb's romantic life except from some poems or some letters. It is said that it was during one of his visits to the Grandmother Field that he met Anne Simmons, who was at that time 17 years old. But then their relationship did not actually go beyond daydreams and county walks. And when he got admitted to Christ Hospital, he stayed there at Christ Hospital for almost 7 years, by which he could make acquaintance with Coleridge, with Leigh Hunt. Those were friendships actually which lasted for a lifetime. And the strict routine of Christ Hospital was too much for these boys to take. Of course, he is talking about all those moments that he had spent at Christ Hospital in some of his essays, especially the essay Christ Hospital 5 and 30 years ago. That is a very beautiful essay where he connects, or where he talks about the relationship that he has with Coleridge and all. So Coleridge got into Cambridge, but Charles Lamb had this stuttering, this impediment that he had in his speech, and the utter poverty the utter poverty that they were in. Both of these things prevented Charles Lamb in pursuing higher studies. He was, of course, a good scholar, a very good scholar like Coleridge himself, but after leaving school, he had to go for work. He obtained a post in Southsea House, where at that time Samuel Salt was the deputy governor. Lamb, who was, as I told you, was a very voracious reader from childhood onwards. He, after reaching Southsea House, he was a clerk there. So after reaching there, he spent his leisure time reading, and the time that he spent with his sister Mary was, of course, very fruitful, in the sense that she was also a voracious reader and he was also a reader. So both of them had quite a good match in reading. And as far as their family life is concerned, it was quite wearisome and quite gloomy. His father was growing more and more childish, and mother was becoming almost an invalid. And the strain of insanity which is there in the mother and the father, probably this strain of insanity did show on Mary as well. And in a fit of frenzy, one day she stabbed her mother with a knife. So Mary's life would have confined to into an asylum had not Charles Lamb offered to be her guardian, which, of course, John Lamb wanted to confine her into an asylum, but Charles Lamb actually took up the responsibility of taking care of Mary Lamb, which of course meant the sacrifice of his personal life as such, his love life as such, and most of the ambitions that he had in his life. He could not go anywhere. So he was, in that sense, we can say that Charles Lamb was such a good-hearted fellow, and took it upon himself. Nobody actually forced him to do that. He was taking it upon himself, and he did not ever complain afterwards. He was a man, we could say, at the very age of 21 or 22 years old, promised to look after his sister for life, to keep her out of the bedlam, and did so, maintaining her at home. He actually provided everything at home, that she could be so very independent as she chose, subject to some kinds of bouts of bouts of insanity emerging at times. So all these facts that we get to know about Charles Lamb's life would instill, or would move us to know more about him. We would become so very curious about such a wonderful, such a good-hearted personality. Now, talking about his literary life, he took up literary career, writing career. Of course, he was quite influenced by Coleridge, and every one of them. You see, you have the romantic vein, romanticism, and the focus on human beings, the focus on normal life, the focus on ordinary life, given importance. So Charles Lamb began writing about in 1795, and he had, of course, experimented with both prose and verse. He wrote a bit of sonnets, plays, fiction, everything. He brought out a tragedy titled John Woodville, which was published in the year 1802. And it was in the style of his favorite Elizabethan playwrights, but it was not successful on stage. And then you have his critical works, which is found in his Specimens of English Dramatic Poets Who Lived About the Time of Shakespeare, which was published in 1808. Now, this work is, of course, quite remarkable for its delicate insight and good literary taste. Now, when you compare all of these, when you compare his essays, all of these works are of little merit. Now, he also developed friendship with William Hazlitt, William Godwin, Wordsworth, etc. Now, it was in 1807 he and Mary wrote Tales from Shakespeare. I hope almost all of you might be familiar with this Tales from Shakespeare. It is something that we read, right? So Mary was taking up the task of comedies, they were abridging the Shakespearean comedies as well as tragedy, and Mary was doing with the comedies, and Lamb was doing it with the tragedies. Now, it was in 1817 that he had to leave Temple for Covent Garden, which of course closed a very interesting chapter of his life. But Lamb was always associated with Temple. Temple was actually his birthplace. Temple, the church there, the garden there, the fountain there, the river there, everything influenced him quite a lot, actually. So in a work, in an essay, The Old Benches of the Inner Temple, where he is providing with a very touching portrait of his father under the name Lovel, Lovel. Of course, he adored the city life as well. But in 1820, it was William Hazlitt who actually introduced him to the editor of London Magazine, from where the famous Elia essays came into existence. It was with this publication in the London Magazine that he got the best medium that he could voice himself in the form of Elia essays, so that he could express himself. This was the very suited medium for him, a short essay-like medium, because of his hectic schedule, he had to take care of his lunatic sister on the one hand. He had this hectic schedule on the other hand, being a clerk in a company. So what happens is you cannot go for novel, like you cannot go for large or big writing. So this was actually a very apt medium for him, and Elia found it out, right? So it was with this that he it was in London Magazine. It was in London Magazine that he signed the first essay under the name Elia. Elia was a name which he had taken at random as that of a foreigner, a clerk in the Southsea House. Now, the original series of essays of Elia was published as The Essays of Elia in 1823, and the second one under the title The Last Essays of Elia, published in 1833. One is in 1823 and one is in 1833. So all of his essays are touched with personal opinions and recollections. Now you see that Lamb has attempted writing lots and lots of genres. Like he has attempted at poetry, at drama, but it is through essays that we all know him, right? It is through essays that he has become famous. He is known to us. So when Elia appeared in London and the reading public took Charles Lamb to their hearts, he was actually a quakish bachelor of 45 who was quite informal, witty, sentimental, sharp, scholarly of course, wise and original, and a romantic as well, reasonable romantic, who could say a great deal in a brief space, and who enjoyed the people that he met, who was so happy with the people that he met, and if the people that he met would be older, the better would be for him, because he would find humor from the oddities of men, right? From the oddities of men. Okay, as I told you before, probably the duties that he had as a clerk until the age of 50 years old, and the sacrifice that he was doing for the sake of his sister did not give him much of a leisure for his literary pursuits, right? So probably that is the reason why he did go for shorter form of the essay, by which, of course, probably that was the best medium that he had, and probably that is the reason why he had attained such great heights in the literary field. He himself says, my essays, he was writing to one of his publishers. He says, I quote, my essays want no preface. They are all preface. A preface is nothing but a talk with a reader, and they do nothing else. So what happens is his essays, he feels like it is something which talks to the readers. See, a writer who is speaking to the readers, a a man who speaks to another man. This is the idea of romanticism, idea of romantic writers, romantic works. Now, he at the end of it, we can say that he got retired from the East India Company in 1825. Probably he thought that is sort of a freedom, and he wrote to William Wordsworth that he has got freedom after 33 years of slavery. But probably in reality it might not be so. Now, talking about the features of Lamb's essays, features of Charles Lamb's essays, Lamb, as you all know, is known as the Prince of Essays. His prose style is very, very lyrical, obviously a mark of romantic writer. The prose style is very lyrical, very personal, very intimate, without any show of any sort of erudition, which we often see in neoclassical writers. See, in neoclassical writers, we see that so much of showing off their knowledge is seen. But then Charles Lamb, probably because he is a romantic writer, he does not believe in showing off his intelligence and all. So he does not show off his intelligence in his writings. And most of the time, Charles Lamb is contrasted with Bacon. Bacon, you see, whose essays are coldly impersonal, and it is coldly impersonal, whereas at the same time impressive but tiring, right? It is Bacon's essays are filled with so many advices, so many knowledge, so many understanding, wisdom, etc. But then it's tiring most of the time. There is an attempt at this scientific accuracy, which most of the time exhausts the reader easily. But Charles Lamb's works are quite subjective in nature, most of the time autobiographical in nature, and they are humorous. And it is a humor which is at times moved to pathos. Now, he does not want to, as I told you, he does not want to shower us with lots and lots of facts or advices. But he does talk about the happy side of life, the darker side of life, everything. There is a very beautiful combination of the personal and the universal in Charles Lamb. You have the very beautiful combination of personal life, but then he talks about universal things as well. There is this beautiful mixture of wit, humor, and pathos, which makes his essays very much lyrical and aesthetically beautiful. And we see that most of the time he presents to us human beings with in all their varieties, which is another feature of romantic writers. The represent human beings are being given importance, that to ordinary life is being given importance. Now, ordinary life without any sort of exhibitionisms and all. He talks about love, he talks about life, he talks about beauty. He of course sometimes he takes recourse in supernaturalism. Probably he is quite influenced by Coleridge, right? So he is interested in the medieval times as well. That is also another feature of romantic writers. He goes for supernaturalism, again a feature of romanticism. So, unlike the neoclassical writers who does emphasize rationality much more, intellect much more, you see that in Charles Lamb we see much of imagination at work, and he presents each and every character that he has seen in a very beautiful light, in a very using his imagination, right? And probably his works could be taken as vehement reactions against the rationality or intellectual framework of the Augustan prose style, which we know that it is much more factual in nature, right? And another thing that we find in Charles Lamb is memory, imagination, and memory. He always lives, or he loves to talk about his past. He is quite nostalgic about his past. There is always the remembrance of past which is seen in every, when he is talking about his grandmother, when he's talking about his father, his maids, everybody, you have a going back to the past. So all these things, all these features, all these personal, intimate, subjective, nostalgic, imaginative aspect of his life, lyrical aspect of his essays, marks his essays as well as himself as one of the brilliant essays of all times. Thank you.